Funding for Building New York is provided by First American Title Insurance Company of New York.
Welcome to Building New York. My name is Michael Stoller. How does a Chinese history major who wants to go into international law, who comes to New York in 1995, become one of the largest landlords of office buildings in Lower Manhattan? How does the San Francisco kid embellish and love New York and tell us everything about New York? I'm fortunate today to have Kent Swig, the principal of Swig Equities, also partner of Tierra Holdings, Brown Harris Stevens, Halstead Properties, as my guest. Thank you for being here, Kent.
It's a pleasure.
You grew up in California and you went to Brown University. And your major was?
Chinese history.
Why Chinese history?
Well, I'm one of those, I guess, that went to undergrad and thought it was an interesting idea to study something that was really of interest to me. And I took a survey course at Brown my first year. Just a bunch of friends took Chinese history, thought it would be something of relevance to go to, and went to the one course and finished it, wanted a little bit more the next semester. And one course led to two, led to three, and ended up majoring in Chinese history, which was fascinating.
You graduate Brown University, you return to California, you go to University of California at Hastings Law School, and your major was?
Well, just law.
Law,
well,
but
mostly I wanted to do international law.
You wanted to do international law. And then what happened?
Well, I was proceeding on my way to going to China. I'd lived in China before I went to law school for about 5-6 months, and I was on my way to working in international law and working in China. They had a program back in the early 80s, mid-80s, with bringing over law students into mainland China to teach them about the law and to go through and teach Western law and start to adapt that to basically the Chinese culture. My father at the time, my family's been in real estate since my grandfather started a firm in 1936. And he wasn't feeling well, had cancer at the time, and asked me not to go into practice of law, but instead to work in my family's business. And I ended up going there for about a year.
And what year was that?
That was 85, I guess it was.
But you were in San Francisco. You worked for Kushman and Wakefield.
Yeah, I went to work for my family for about a year. My father was feeling better. Then I went to work in Kushman and Wakefield for about 18 months. I was working in the financial services group in San Francisco, selling office buildings, residential buildings, land, and also working out of Cushman's Los Angeles office.
And then suddenly you find a deal and you decide to make a phone call to a New York City investor?
Well, before that, I went back to work with my family. My father had another round of cancer, which he recovered from and ended up living actually 10 years after, so that was good. But I ended up working back with my family, and we were in the midst of doing a deal to buy a property in Long Beach, California, Southern California. And we had a partner who at the last moment, quite literally 2 weeks before we were supposed to close, backed out of the deal, decided he just didn't want to do it. And then did some calling, cold call somebody in New York City, basically, to see if they wanted to venture a deal with us.
And who was this individual that you cold called?
This guy named Harry Macklow from the Macklow organization, and put in a call to him. The president of our family's firm knew him, so gave me the introduction. I called. It seemed like a logical play for him. that he was very aggressive, and I was an avid reader of everybody in the real estate industry. He seemed like he was one of the most aggressive players in the marketplace, so called him up, introduced myself, said, you know, maybe, I don't know if you've heard of my family's business. He said, yes, of course. I said, we've got a property in Southern California, and I thought that it would be of interest to you.
So how'd you come to New York?
How'd I come to New York? Well, I guess the first time I came to New York, I was 10 years old, and I went with my parents, and it was the first time.
When did you come to New York to live in New York?
When I was 10, it felt that way. It was the first time I ever felt comfortable in a place in my life, was really when I got to New York when I was 10. Then when I came to New York, I moved here. The first time was in 1986. In August of '86, I moved here for 3 months working on properties that my family owned, and then eventually moved back here in July of '87.
Now, you moved back in July of '87. Were you married at this time?
I was married.
And who were you married to?
I was married to my present wife, Liz Swig.
Who happened to be Harry Maclaw's daughter.
It did, and does.
And when you came back here, you weren't working in the family business. You were working in the other family business.
Yeah, I came back here. I worked with the Maclaw organization for about 7.5 years until April of '94. And then struck out to do some deals.
So it's April of 1994, a very difficult time in the real estate business. And at that time you're what, 45 now?
I am.
So at that time you were 33?
Uh-huh.
At 33, you decide to venture out in the cold world of real estate. And what did you do? What was your first thing you did in 1994?
Found office space. I did all the things that one does when you start a company, become an administrator. Xerox machines, office space, telephone systems.
But what about the first piece of real estate?
What did I do? I did brokerage. I bought 22 units in Tudor City that were taken back by the bank, and I was able to go close on those units. And then I was doing brokerage deals, representing tenants in the marketplace. A firm called Picard and Abramson. I think I moved to 6,000 feet. At 1185 6th Avenue was the first deal I did, and did a lot of other brokerage deals and very slight acquisitions, and then got into some other things.
It's March of 1995,
right?
And you, with Will and Arthur Zeckendorf, Eric Hadar, and one other partner,
and
David Burris, decide that you're going to buy a prominent name in the management. And you decide to buy Brown Harris Stevens.
Mm-hmm.
How did you decide to do that?
Well, I had gone to lunch with Will and Arthur Zeckendorf in November of '94. Went through what I was doing in the business, what they were doing in the business. Our families had been partners back 3 generations. And we were both saying that we were confronting similar issues. It was a very poor marketplace. As we did buy property, we would take on the operations of it. So we'd spend a lot of time doing the operations, which took us out of the marketplace to really try to buy properties. If we hired a lot of people to run it, we had to pay them, and we didn't really have the resources to engage a lot of people on staff. And it was this battle of, how do you grow the business between your, spending your time and your resources. And I was saying one of the things I wanted to do was to buy an operating company and get a platform and a foundation on which to build, which was very much what they were looking to do. I said I'd heard of one company that might be available, and we were sort of exploring that. Then Arthur Zeckendorf heard about Brown Harris Stevens, and they had called me up and said, would you be interested? I said, absolutely. And we joined forces together, David Burris and I, and Will and Arthur. And we brought in Eric Hadar to join with us, and we ended up acquiring the firm from the Helmsley organization in March of '95.
And when did you buy a building? You owned the Tudor City.
Yeah.
When did you start becoming the Kent Swig that I know, who owns a lot of Lower Manhattan?
Well, the first building David Burris and Will and Arthur Zeckendorf and I bought was in August of '95, which we bought 770 Lexington. And
that's about a block away from Bloomingdale's.
Right, it's diagonally across the street from Bloomingdale's. So we purchased that, and then we did that, a lot of it for the ease and of the operation for Brown Harris Stevens, because Brown Harris Stevens needed office space. We were all over the Helmsley building at the time, and we wanted to consolidate offices, put in new telephone systems, and really put the infrastructure together. So we moved in there, and we operated the building and operated the company and grew the company really from 95 to 98, almost before we really, any of us looked at doing any other deals into the marketplace until we got a solid base.
And you, at that time, you also bought Halstead Properties?
We didn't, not at the time, but we were coming up was Halstead Properties, which is another brand that we bought collectively and have grown that.
And Feathered Nest?
Feathered Nest we bought, which was a residential firm, and we have a firm called Vanderbilt Holdings, which is a multidisciplined firm that does financing and appraisal and marketing and some mortgage brokerage work. So, but I guess the first building was that I bought was in March. It was a very good month, March for me, March of 1998, which was 48 Wall Street downtown.
So all of a sudden, everybody really didn't like Lower Manhattan. I mean, Mayor Giuliani did a great job, and he was offering what we would call 421Gs, which were incentives if you would convert an office building to residential. And if you look on Wall Street today, I'd say the majority of the properties have been converted to residential, with the exception of Kent Swig's properties. And in 1999, you were thinking of converting your first office building, 48 Wall,
right,
to residential. What happened?
Well, the market was less than good in 1998 when we first bought the building, and we closed March 98. Then the Bank of New York, from whom we purchased the building, remained in occupancy for 1 year. So moved out about April 1999. We set up at that time to demolish the interior of the building, all the old offices and the infrastructure that we were going to remove out. And then came the question, obviously, do we keep it office, do we convert it to residential, or do we even convert it to a hotel? The idea behind the acquisition was to convert it to residential because the residential market was growing. There were benefits that were in the marketplace. And we set about a whole design program to do that during the demolition. At the same time, we were negotiating with Intercontinental Hotels to put a hotel on the site. And we were leaving in the back of our minds, maybe we'd keep it commercial, but the market was really hammered and doing very poorly, so we decided...
The commercial market?
The commercial market, so we left that sort of in the back burner. And all three economics really were about equal. And at some point, my feeling was, one of these markets would really rise above all of them, and we would know clearly where to go. So after 11 months of demolition on the interior, because it was a huge task to get it at all the old walls out, which were all the terracotta walls, we were set to go and start the program for residential conversion. And we put out a couple teaser ads to the residential brokerage community. The more teaser ads we put out to the residential brokerage community, the more commercial brokers called us. Well, after a while, you get enough calls, you figure maybe there's something to this. And what happened was that the commercial market took off. And clearly it was...
It was the internet bubble?
Well, it was the internet bubble, but even more than that, the economy was doing well. It finally sort of got its legs back. The banking industry came back. Hiring started to take place, and the market was growing. And the internet bubble certainly was helpful. And then when you looked at the building itself, it was very evident of the reason to keep it commercial. On a commercial basis, measuring the building with commercial measurements, there was 278,000 feet of income-producing space in the building. With the residential conversion, there was 192,000 square feet of income-producing space. So here was a third more by keeping it commercial, just through the way space is measured on a commercial basis versus a residential basis. More efficient building, on a commercial basis. The other thing is it would save us probably 11 months of construction time and maybe 30% of the cost of construction by keeping it commercial. And so the fear was at one point was, they're not big floor plates, it'd be multi-tenant floors. Is there a market deep enough that would allow us to lease in a period of time that made it reasonable to be able to keep it commercial? The market came back, it was very strong, and it was clear. So we kept it commercial, and we leased, and we ended up doing phenomenally well. And at the time, there were no buildings offering full floor identification to the smaller tenants with really high-end services in that area, and we just happened to hit the market very, very well.
And then you continued your pilgrimage to Lower Manhattan. You bought another building.
Yeah, well, then we saw what successes that we achieved. Basically, that we were able to get the best of the tenancy in the marketplace. And fortunately for us, we turned down literally every .com company at the time, except for one, and they went out of business. So we were batting 100% there. But what we did find is this: of those tenants that were in the marketplace, we ended up getting the best, maybe a little bit more rent, but certainly the best of the tenancy, and we leased faster than anybody else. So from there, we went right on, and we ended up making a pretty big
So what was your
acquisition.
second acquisition downtown?
The second one was in August of 2003.
So it was 5 years.
It was 5 years. Yeah, the development of the project took, you know, a number, and also obviously 9/11 hit, and things were.
So it's August of 2003, and
Right.
what do you do then?
Then I bought a building at 5 Hanover Square, which is 320,000 feet. Again, redeveloped the whole project, and then from there, in December of 2003, or is it January of 2004, I bought 44 Wall Street, which is 350,000 feet.
So you have 44, you have 48.
Then I went to, and we already had 7 Hanover Square with the Milstein family, and I had 5 Hanover. Then I went, and then I bought 80 Broad in June of 2004, which is 400,000 feet. And then in December '04, I bought 110 William, which is about 900,000 feet. And then December, just recently, '05, I bought 90 Broad, which is 400,000 feet.
So
and then 25 Broad, actually.
We'll get to 25
another
Broad.
one.
So how much office space in Lower Manhattan do you own today?
About 4 million feet, maybe a little over 4.3 million feet, somewhere in there.
And how much office space is there in Lower Manhattan today?
Yeah, plus or minus 85 million feet.
85 million, but that's
Yeah,
including
down
Battery.
from 105 million.
But that's including Battery Park City.
Yeah, you're right, absolutely.
But you've been very bullish on Lower Manhattan, and suddenly you changed your venue. You were buying all these office buildings, and in April of 2005, you decide to purchase, in partnerships with Yair Levy and Serge Hoyda, a residential building on 57th Street called the Sheffield from the Rose family.
Right.
How did you decide to buy this residential building?
Well, I purchased a bit. I'd always been involved in residential. It's interesting. You know, people say they've only known me with my family's business as a commercial developer investor. Then we bought Brown Harris Stevens in March '95. Everybody said, "Oh, gee, you do residential?" We said, "Yeah, we do some residential and other work." And then I bought 48 Wall Street, and as I said, in March of '98. And people, "Oh, we didn't know you did commercial. I thought we only did residential." Then you do the and I've always done actually both. And we owned and bought properties on 89th Street. David Burris and I bought a residential building there back in, I guess it was it was 97 or so. But the marketplace obviously was good. We saw opportunity. I bought one on the Upper West Side on 92nd, 93rd in Amsterdam with Yair Levy and Charles Diane. And this one came up, and there's opportunity.
So you bought, last year you bought the Sheffield for $414 million, the largest purchase of a single residential building. Then you bought with Yair and Serge and Charles 92nd Street, which you're building in another rental apartment house. And then in September, you bought a property which was converted from office building to residential, 25 Exchange.
Right, 25 Broad. Right.
25 Broad. And today, what are you doing with the residential deals?
Well, you know, there was a rhyme and reason for getting involved in the residential marketplace, just like the commercial marketplace. I actually did a whole market study and business plan of where the market was going in the commercial side, and we stuck to it and grew our portfolio downtown. And the residential market, I saw something that I thought was an opportunity, which was to buy existing rental properties that were market-free properties, if you will, relatively or completely unencumbered by rent-stabilized or rent-controlled leases, and go in, renovate these buildings, and convert them into condominiums. and that's the program that we've embarked on.
So you're going to convert the one building downtown,
Right.
and you're going to convert the Sheffield,
Correct.
which is right now, as you said to me last week when we met, the Time Warner Center has truly changed that entire neighborhood.
Dramatically, right.
And you're also, what are you doing on 92nd Street?
92nd Street, it's a rental building of 134 units, and what we'll be doing there is maintaining the rental status of the building, but on top of the building we'll be building a condominium of about 125,000 square feet. So, complicated job.
Mm. And do you think while many people are looking at Lower Manhattan and saying the market isn't really good, are you looking at Lower Manhattan to buy more commercial buildings and maintain them as commercial buildings?
Yes, yeah. I'm bullish on downtown.
I think we're both bullish on downtown. But why are you so bullish? Why are you and I both so bullish on Lower Manhattan when all these people are not that bullish?
Well, for me, I mean, I've recognized what hopefully is true, is that there's a disconnect between what the perception of the marketplace is and what the reality is. And I think the perception is tainted. The perception is that people don't want to live downtown, when in fact it's the fastest growing residential city in the United States. The perception is that the infrastructure, the transportation system is poor. Well, partially that was true. The delivery system was poor, but the infrastructure itself, the railroad tracks underground, is phenomenal. There's more railroad track underground in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, than any other place, any other city in the United States on a per square foot basis, including Midtown. But the delivery system was bad. There's no stations that were really wonderful, and there was no hubs. That's being remedied right now. You've got the Whitehall Street station, which is finished, which is a ferry terminal. You've got the Battery Park ferry terminal, which is under construction, which is physically connected to the Santiago Calatrava station, which is physically connected to the Fulton Broadway station, which is really the downtown Grand Central. And each one of those transportation hubs is the largest project of its kind in the U.S. All four are downtown, and three of them are together, connected underground. That's revolutionizing the delivery system of the transportation system. The other thing going on there, it's still a very big city. It's the third largest office concentration in the United States, behind Midtown and Chicago. And all of the underground infrastructure has also been recreated. Every pipe, Con Ed pipe, water main, electric pipe, has all been replaced basically south of Canal Street. So you've got a brand new city going on right now. And the question is, when does it all sort of coalesce? And I say over the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to be an extraordinary place to be. And what we're doing is we're going back in time into really the 1860s, 70s, when downtown Manhattan was the leading city in the United States. It had the financial strength, it had the office space, it had finest transportation system anywhere in the country, if not the world, and it had a good residential population. All of that's is reemerging back. I mean, obviously we're going into the future, but it's recreating its dominance in the past. I don't think it supersedes Midtown, but it certainly catches up to it. And the discrepancy in rent, the discrepancy in value is the greatest it's ever been in New York's history. So with that, there's an arbitrage there if the reality of what I've said is going to come to fruition. And in my belief and what I see, it will. And it's just a catch-up.
So you've made a commitment to Lower Manhattan and also now to the West Side. You really are very bullish on the Upper West Side, too. Why do you like the Upper West Side?
I like the Upper East Side as well. I just think
I realize you live in the Upper East Side.
I think the Upper West Side, I think the whole West Side, not just the Upper West Side, is, from a pure real estate standpoint, is an opportunity because it's underdeveloped, if you will. And I think some thoughtful development or redevelopment of properties is an opportunity. So if you look at really the demographics and you look at the various properties around and you look at the underutilization of some of these properties, that there's opportunity.
What about other regions of the city? Brooklyn, Long Island City, the Bronx?
Well, Brooklyn, I think, is a phenomenal place to be. My family had a property there, 210 Livingston. I think that was leased to the Board of Education, but Brooklyn is Ratnerville. I mean, I think Bruce Ratner personally has redeveloped Brooklyn to an unbelievable degree. And we, from Brown, Harris, Stevens, and Halstead, we have offices there. We do work there. The Zeckendorfs and David Burris and I we bought a building there on Montague and Henry Street. I'm a big believer in that. The place where I think the ultimate 20-year to 30-year horizon is Long Island City. I mean, I think it's got the most opportunity. It has subway access, which is very, very important. It has automobile access. It has a beautiful waterfront. You've got all the great views also of New York City, Manhattan, and it's very, very underutilized in terms of land. But it takes some patience.
So 20 years, you've been here since you were 10, but really you're here for 20 years now. And in 20,
10, it was only a couple of weeks, so that doesn't count too much.
And in 20 years, you acquired 3.5 million square feet of office space, number of apartments. Where do you see yourself in the next 20 years?
Surfing somewhere. No, I don't know.
If you were surfing, you'd go back to San Francisco.
No, water's too cold there. Hopefully doing what I'm doing now and building on a platform. I mean, I think one of the more important things that I've done is basically to build a human resources infrastructure, and that's the hard part. The buildings are there, you can buy them, but it's the human element that you bring to the table. And so hopefully I've got a growing operation with wonderful people with whom to work, and we'll be doing similar things, hopefully more or as much. And
would you like to see your two sons go into the business like you?
I would like to see them do something that makes them happy. And whether my younger son, who loves art and sports, it's in that vein. My older son is also athletic and loves music. It depends what they want to do. If there's an interest, sure. But I think first they should go out and have fun and do something that really captures their imagination.
I'm really happy that you've come to be a guest on Building New York, because it's truly an honor to know you and to work with you, and you've really been a builder of New York. Thank you for being here today.
I appreciate it. Thanks very much, Michael.
Funding for Building New York was provided by First American Title Insurance Company of New York.